Hey man, let's rip the bandage off right now. Female loyalty, it's the most romanticized lie sold to men since childhood. You grew up believing that if you loved hard, stayed true, treated her like a queen, and gave her everything when you had it, she'd stick around when life kicked you down. That when the storm hit, she'd be the one holding the umbrella over your head, whispering, "We'll get through this together." But what happens when that storm actually comes? What happens when life knocks you flat? When your money runs dry? When your confidence dips and your world starts cracking? You look beside you and she's not there. And what's worse, she left without warning, without guilt, without looking back, because what you thought was loyalty was convenience. You see, most men think loyalty means riding out the highs and lows together. They think it's about shared struggle, emotional support, and unconditional presence. But for many women today, loyalty is tied to provision, status, and emotional highs. The moment you stop being her source of elevation, the moment your struggle turns you from an escape to a responsibility, her feelings shift, not because she's evil, but because her loyalty wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in what you could provide emotionally, financially, and socially. And when that provision fades, her loyalty transforms into distance, coldness, excuses. You don't even get a proper goodbye. You get silence. You get detachment. You get a woman who once said, "I'll never leave you," now watching you drown while scrolling Instagram. Here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud. Women love the version of you that makes them feel good. The one that fills their world with dreams, security, admiration. The strong you, the ambitious you, the protective you, but the broken you, the struggling you, the confused, tired, uncertain man who just needs a moment to catch his breath. He makes her feel unsafe, uncomfortable, undesired, because when you struggle, she doesn't see partnership, she sees burden. And in a world that teaches women to choose themselves, your burden becomes her escape plan. She tells herself, "He's not who I thought he was," when really you're just going through what every man eventually goes through. But she doesn't care, because your struggle disrupted her fantasy. And women don't stay for struggle, they stay for stability. And it's not that they're heartless, it's that their attachment is conditional. Conditional on how you make them feel, on whether or not your life adds to theirs. And the second your presence stops being an asset, it starts being a liability. And most women aren't built to carry a man's emotional or financial weight. They're built to be carried. So when you stumble, she panics. She looks for exits. She tells herself, "I didn't sign up for this." And just like that, the same woman who once told you she loved your soul now doesn't even want to be in the same room with your reality. Not because your soul changed, but because your circumstances did. And her loyalty was never to your soul, it was to her comfort. Men don't understand this until it's too late. They give their all when they're winning. They build, provide, love, protect. They open their hearts and share their world, and in doing so they expect reciprocity. They expect that if they ever fall, someone will be there to catch them. But brother, that net you think will be there, it's made of thread. Because unless she's built differently, unless she's rare, you're not in love. You're in a contract. And the terms are simple. The moment you stop making her feel a certain way, she reserves the right to check out. And when she does, don't expect closure. Don't expect empathy. Expect absence. Cold, cruel, unapologetic absence. Because female loyalty, for most, doesn't extend past your last good day. And let's be real, this is especially true in the modern world. With social media, dating apps, and instant validation at their fingertips, women have more options than ever. So why would she stick with a man in pain when she can swipe her way to a man who seems like he's winning? Why would she pour into a sinking ship when she could step onto another one already docked with champagne and comfort? She's not being loyal, she's being strategic. And your downfall? That's just a signal to her that it's time to level up, to find someone with more clout, more cash, more emotional bandwidth. And you become a footnote in her story, a memory, a lesson, a man who was once enough until he wasn't. But here's where it hits hardest. You didn't just lose a partner, you lost your illusion. The illusion that love meant safety, that your vulnerability would be met with compassion, that your pain would be held, not avoided. And when she leaves you in your struggle, it doesn't just hurt, it shatters you. Because now you don't just have to recover from life's blows, You have to recover from the realization that the person you loved couldn't handle seeing you human, and that realization cuts deeper than any breakup ever could, because now you know your pain is not allowed, your weakness is not welcome, your humanity is not lovable, at least not by her. So what do most men do? They shut down, they harden, they bury their emotions, they tell themselves, never again. And while that may sound like bitterness, it's actually wisdom. Because once a man realizes that female loyalty often vanishes at the first sign of his struggle, he becomes selective. He stops handing out his devotion like candy. He watches her during his struggle, not just when life is sweet. He pays attention to how she reacts when the world isn't clapping for him, because that's when the mask falls, that's when her love gets tested, and most of the time, it fails. But that failure, it's your liberation, because it forces you to redefine what loyalty actually is. Not words, not Instagram captions, not pillow talk, but presence. Will she sit with you in silence when you've got nothing left to give? Will she still reach for your hand when your name isn't shining? Will she stay when the ride gets bumpy? Or will she look for the nearest exit? These are the questions that separate fantasy from reality. And the moment you stop expecting loyalty from everyone you give love to is the moment you start protecting your soul. That's not cynicism, that's survival. And here's the twist. Once you've been broken by disloyalty, you develop a new kind of strength. A cold, grounded, no bullshit kind of strength. You stop trying to impress. You stop performing. You stop seeking love from those who only love you when you're shining. You become the kind of man who shines from within. And that glow, it repels the superficial. It attracts the real. Because once you know what disloyalty feels like, you learn how to spot the authentic. You start testing her instead of waiting to be tested. And in that shift, you become untouchable. Loyalty, when it's real, doesn't flinch. It doesn't pack its bags when your bank account dips. It doesn't vanish when you're mentally worn, emotionally silent, or physically drained. Real loyalty leans in. It sees the struggle and chooses to stay anyway. But most women today, they weren't raised for that kind of love. They were raised on rom-coms and social media reels, where men are always perfect, always available, always high status and emotionally fulfilling. They weren't taught how to stay when things get messy, so when your season of struggle arrives, they interpret it as failure, not transition. They treat it as a reflection of you, not of life's unavoidable storms. And if you're not prepared for that, it'll crush you. It'll make you second-guess your manhood, question your worth, and wonder if you'll ever be loved without conditions. But that's the trap, that's the illusion. You were never broken, you were just carrying a load too heavy for someone who never planned on lifting it with you. And when she left, it wasn't because you weren't enough, it was because she never planned to carry weight in the first place. Her version of love was built on ease, not endurance. And once ease faded, so did her affection. That's not love, brother. That's rental, loyalty. Love that only lasts as long as you can pay the emotional bill. This is why a man must build from a place of emotional independence. You must assume, going in, that most people will not stay when you struggle. And when someone does, that's the exception, not the rule. That's the rare one. And when you find her, you don't just cherish her, you test her. You test her the same way life tested you. Because too many men fall in love with potential, with the idea that loyalty is a promise. But promises mean nothing without proof. And the only way to see her true character is to see how she responds when your armor cracks. Not how she treats the king, but how she stands beside the wounded warrior. Don't get it twisted. Women are emotional survivors. They will pivot, justify, and reframe their departure as your fault. They'll tell themselves, he changed, or I just wasn't happy anymore. But deep down, you'll know the truth. The moment you weren't elevating her status, her mood, or her fantasy, you became disposable. And that realization, while painful, will be your fuel. It will wake you up from the belief that love means safety. It doesn't, not in this world. Love today often means auditioning for permanence. And when your performance falters, your role gets recast. Brutal, but honest. And here's where men get trapped. They internalize her departure. They think, maybe if I was stronger, richer, happier, more alpha. But that mindset is poison, because it implies that your worth is tied to your output, that your right to be loved is conditional upon your perfection. But that's the lie. your worth was never the problem. Her definition of love was, she wanted comfort, not commitment. She wanted a highlight reel, not a human being. And when you showed her your human side, she ran not because you failed her, but because she was never equipped to love you at that level. So what do you do with that pain? You alchemize it. You turn it into boundaries, standards, vision. You stop making space for anyone who only shows up when you're at your best. You build a life so strong, so grounded, so fulfilling, that her absence no longer haunts you. In fact, you begin to thank it. Because her departure was the fire that burned away your illusions, and in the ashes, you found yourself, the real you, the version of you that no longer needs to be validated by loyalty, that was never built to last. And when she comes back, and trust me, she will, you won't feel anger. You won't seek revenge. You'll feel clarity. You'll remember how easily she left when things got hard, how quickly she shifted from ride or die to goodbye, and you'll smile, not because you're bitter, but because you've grown. You've learned that love without struggle is just infatuation, and anyone who only loves you in the sunshine is not worthy of standing with you in the storm. Let her stay gone, because the man you've become no longer needs temporary comfort. He demands eternal character. Most men go their whole lives without learning this. They keep repeating the cycle, loving hard, falling fast, struggling, then watching her disappear over and over again, until one day they break or they wake up. And those who wake up, they become the rare breed. The ones who no longer chase, no longer beg, no longer explain. They simply observe. They let time do the revealing. They build their lives like fortresses, not playgrounds, and only the real ones make it through the gates. Female loyalty ends the moment you struggle, unless you find the one woman who's different. And even then, you test her. You make sure she's not there for the benefits, but for the battle. You make sure she's not just riding shotgun during the victory lap, but that she's ready to grab a shovel and help you dig when the engine dies. Because you don't need someone to celebrate you, you need someone to rebuild with you. Someone who's still there when the crowd stops clapping. That's not romance, that's reality, and real love lives there. So remember this, don't ever mistake attraction for loyalty. Don't ever confuse her affection during your highs as proof she'll survive your lows. Observe, test, lead, and above all, build your life in such a way that her loyalty is optional, not required. Because the strongest man is the one who never needs her to stay, but only chooses the woman who wants to, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unclear. That's love, brother. And anything less? It's just performance wrapped in illusion. One of the harshest truths you'll ever face as a man is realizing that the moment you're no longer the provider, the emotional support, the dream builder, she'll start seeing you as the problem. That quiet shift in her tone, the way her texts become shorter, how the intimacy fades, it's not random, it's not stress, it's her detaching, emotionally pulling away before she physically does, because your downfall triggers her flight response. She can no longer project her fairy tale onto you, so instead of digging deeper, she starts rewriting the story. And in this new story, you're not the hero anymore, you're the liability. Men often ask, why does she change once I need help? The truth? She never changed. You just stopped fitting the image she had in her mind, and that image wasn't based on who you are, it was based on how you made her feel. You see, many women fall in love with what a man represents, not who he is. You represent strength, power, certainty, escape. The moment you bleed, she sees behind the curtain. She sees that you're human, that you have fears, doubts, breakdowns, and because she was never in love with your humanity, but your heroism, she turns away, and you're left trying to pick up the pieces of a love that was never built to survive real life. And here's the sick twist. The more you try to explain yourself, the faster she checks out. The more you say, I'm just going through something, the more she interprets it as weakness. You open up to bridge the gap. She sees it as a collapse. That's the emotional mismatch most men suffer from. You reveal your wounds, hoping for comfort, but she sees those wounds as failure. She sees your tears as instability. You think vulnerability creates connection. She sees it as proof. You're no longer the man she can rely on, and in that moment, the person you loved most becomes emotionally unreachable. This is why you must never give your soul to someone who only showed up for your glow. Let her fall for your discipline, not your dollars. Let her admire your direction, not just your destination, because if she only loves the end result, she'll never survive the process. And brother, the process will come. Life will test you. You will fall. The world will shake. And when it does, you need someone who doesn't just tolerate that season, but respects it, who sees your struggle and says, I still believe in you. That woman is rare. That woman is priceless. But until she arrives, you protect your world like it's sacred, because it is. There will come a day where you look back at the moment she walked out and realize it was the best thing that could have happened. Her absence revealed her truth, and her truth sharpened yours. You'll stop looking at women as saviors and start seeing them as mirrors. She left, not because you were unworthy, but because she couldn't handle the real version of you. She wanted the polished, filtered, Instagram-worthy man. But you're not that. You're forged in fire, not fantasy. And only a woman who's walked through her own flames will ever be able to walk beside you in yours. You have to understand, female loyalty isn't always betrayal when it fails. Sometimes it's just incompatibility disguised as affection. She's not evil. She's unprepared. Not equipped to hold space for a man who's building, not just shining. And when you finally see that, your heartbreak becomes wisdom. You no longer chase women for emotional safety. You become the safety. You become the grounded force in a world of shifting feelings. And from that place, you lead. You attract. You set the terms. Not because you're bitter, but because now you know better. Most men are never taught this. They grow up thinking women will love them the way their mothers did, unconditionally. But romantic love is not maternal love. It's not boundless. It's not patient by default. It's conditional, transactional, and reactive. A woman's love today is often dictated by the environment you create. When that environment collapses, so does her attraction. And if you don't learn that soon, you'll keep confusing her presence with permanence. Don't. Her presence only means something if it survives your absence. And what you'll find over time is that the more grounded you become, the fewer women you entertain. Not because you're bitter or lonely, but because your filter gets sharper. You don't need constant validation anymore. You're no longer drawn to chaos disguised as passion. You look for peace, for consistency, for emotional maturity. And when a woman shows you that, you value it. Not because you're desperate for it, but because you understand what it costs. You've seen the fake version. You've survived it. Now, you only accept the real thing. So here's the cold, freeing truth. Most women will not stand by you when you fall. And that's okay. Because the few who do, they're worth everything, but they're not found through charm or money or surface level attraction. They're found through time, through struggle, through tests. You don't choose them too early. You let the storm arrive. You let life shake you, and then you see who's still standing next to you. That's the woman you build with. Not the one who cheers for you when you're on top, but the one who prays for you when you're on your knees. Female loyalty ends the moment you struggle. Not because women are broken, but because most have never been taught what real partnership looks like. But you've learned. You've been burned. You've seen the mask fall, and now you move different. You no longer beg for loyalty. You command it through your standards, and those who can't match it, they're simply not allowed access, because your peace, your vision, your reality, it's sacred. And no woman gets to step into that unless she's ready to stay when things get hard. That's your power, and from this point on, you never give it away again. You'll notice something wild once you embrace this mindset. The moment you stop fearing loss, you stop losing. The moment you stop clinging to women out of desperation or scarcity, they start clinging to you. Why? Because now your energy is clean. You're no longer broadcasting weakness, insecurity, or need. You're solid. And women can feel that from across the room. But here's the irony. Now that you don't need them, you won't tolerate the ones who only love you when it's convenient. You'll smile at their games. You'll let them walk, because your throne is no longer up for negotiation. You may still feel the sting of abandonment from time to time. You may still replay the moments where she stopped holding your hand, where she stopped checking in, where the woman who once swore she'd never leave did. That's normal. You're human. But don't let those memories weaken you. Let them shape you. Let them be the reason you now value proof over promises. Let them be the reason your standards no longer bend just because she looks good in a dress. Let her ghost be the architect of your boundaries, because now you don't just want a partner, you want a warrior beside you. You'll watch as other men fall into the same trap you once did, giving their all to women who only show up when the sun is shining, and you'll want to warn them, you'll want to scream, "She's going to leave when it gets real," but you won't, because some men need to learn through fire, just like you did. You'll sit quietly, watching as life teaches them what you now carry in your bones, and when they come to you, broken and confused, you'll pass on the truth, not from a place of bitterness, but from wisdom, because pain only becomes power when it's shared with purpose. One day, you'll meet a woman who seems different, and she might be, but this time you'll know how to find out. You won't rush in head first. You won't hand her the keys to your world after 3 good dates. You'll observe. You'll let time reveal her. You'll notice how she reacts when you're tired, how she speaks when you're not at your best, how she shows up, not when you're winning, but when you're wounded. And if she shows up with grace, patience, and support, not pity, not judgment, then maybe, just maybe, you've found something rare. But you'll still test, because now you know better. You'll look back at the version of yourself who tolerated women, who bailed at the first sign of struggle, and you'll barely recognize him. That man was scared. That man was soft in all the wrong places. That man confused tolerance with strength. But now, you've hardened, not in your heart, but in your frame. You no longer confuse attention for affection. You no longer assume that just because she says "I'm here," she means it. Now, you require consistency. Now, you understand that real love is revealed under pressure, and if she can't handle the heat, you don't let her near the fire again. And when she, yes, the one who left, comes back around, trying to rekindle what she once discarded, you won't entertain it, not because you're petty, but because you've grown. You'll look at her with clear eyes and a steady heart and say, "You left when I needed you most, and now I'm the man you couldn't wait for." And that moment, my brother, will be your closure. Not a scream, not revenge, just peace, just truth. Because now, you no longer need to prove anything. You are everything she said she wanted. She just didn't have the loyalty to ride through the storm. You'll come to see that the masculine path is lonely, but it's also sacred. You're not just building wealth or power, you're building integrity. You're learning how to walk alone without feeling incomplete. You're no longer a boy begging to be loved. You're a man choosing who gets access. And once you get here, once you stop depending on female loyalty for your identity, you become dangerous. Not in a reckless way, in a solid way. Your presence becomes its own gravity. Your silence becomes louder than any game. And women either rise to meet you or disappear into the noise. The world will keep selling you the lie that unconditional female loyalty exists for all men. It doesn't. It exists for the few men who've earned their solitude, the men who've suffered, rebuilt, and refused to settle. It exists for the men who no longer place their worth in how adored they are, but in how true they remain. That's the path you're now on. You don't just chase love anymore. You qualify it. You filter it. You protect your castle, not just from enemies, but from the kind of love that wears a crown and flees the moment the kingdom is under siege. And the beauty of all this, one day you won't even remember her name. Not because you erased it, but because your life became so full, so purpose-driven, so grounded, that the absence of her presence no longer created a void. Your loyalty is now reserved for yourself, for your vision, for the people who show up when it's hard. Because that's what you learned. Loyalty isn't measured by who dances with you at your wedding, but by who bleeds with you in battle. And from now on, only those people get to stand in your circle. So here's the final truth, brother. Female loyalty often ends the moment you struggle, but your loyalty to yourself, to truth, to growth, must never waver. Because when you build from that place, when you live rooted in reality, not fantasy, you stop being the man who begs for love. You become the man who commands respect. And any woman who wants to walk with you, she'll have to earn it. Not through her beauty, not through sweet words, but through presence, through consistency, through loyalty. That shows up when it's ugly. And if she can't meet you there, let her go. Because now you walk alone if you must. But you'll never walk small again.